The morning sun of New Terra Prime cast long shadows across the galactic shopping district. This was not the yellow sun that humans remembered from old Earth, but a bright white star that made everything look clean and sharp. The shopping district sat in the heart of the city, where tall glass buildings reached toward the sky like crystal fingers. Sandra Martinez stepped off the transport shuttle and looked around. Her boots made soft sounds on the smooth stone walkway. She wore simple, brown pants and a faded blue shirt that had seen better days. Dust from the dig site on Kepler 442b still clung to her sleeves, and her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She carried a small backpack that looked worn and practical. People and creatures of all kinds moved through the district. Humans walked beside tall, thin beings with silver skin who spoke in musical tones. Small, furry creatures with 6 legs scurried between the crowds, carrying packages. Flying beings with colorful wings glided overhead, their shadows dancing on the ground below. Sandra had been away from civilization for 6 months. The dig site had been her whole world during that time. Ancient ruins, old bones, and mysterious artifacts had filled her days. She was one of the best at her job, finding old things that told stories about the past. Her work had changed everything for humans and aliens alike, but she never thought much about that. She just loved digging in the dirt and solving old puzzles. Now, she was back in the city, and it felt strange. The clean air, the smooth walkways, the sounds of many different languages, all mixing together. It was so different from the quiet desert world where she had been working. Behind her, walking with quiet steps, was Kyle Stevens. He was tall and moved like someone who had spent years in the military. His clothes were simple too, just dark pants and a plain gray shirt, but something about the way he carried himself made people notice him. His eyes were always watching, always ready. Most people who saw him might think he was just another human, but they would be wrong. Kyle had been many things in his life: a soldier, a leader, a hero to some people. Now he worked as a diplomat, trying to keep peace between different worlds and species. Today, he was just Sandra's friend, walking with her through the busy district. "You sure you want to go to that fancy store?" Kyle asked, his voice quiet but clear. "You know how those places can be," Sandra shrugged. "I need to buy something nice for Dr. Chen back at the university. She helped me get funding for the dig. Besides, I have money now from the research grant." They walked past shops selling food from a dozen different worlds. Strange smells mixed in the air, some sweet, some sharp, some that made Sandra's nose wrinkle. Alien music played from speakers, mixing with the sounds of different languages, and the hum of flying vehicles overhead. The Stellar Gems jewelry store stood at the end of the main street. It was made of white stone that seemed to glow in the sunlight. Large windows showed displays of beautiful jewelry from across the galaxy. Crystals that changed color, metals that seemed to flow like water, and gems that looked like they held tiny stars inside them. As they got closer to the store, Sandra felt a little nervous. She was used to dig sites in university halls, not fancy shops. Her clothes suddenly felt too old and too dirty. She looked down at her hands and saw dirt under her fingernails that she had missed when washing up. "Maybe this isn't such a good idea," she said, stopping in front of the store. Kyle put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You belong anywhere you want to be, Sandra. Your work has helped more people than most folks will ever know." Sandra took a deep breath and nodded. She had faced down dangerous animals on alien worlds and climbed into dark caves that no one had entered for thousands of years. She could handle one jewelry store. The door opened without a sound as they approached. Cool air flowed out, carrying the smell of expensive perfume and something else, something clean and artificial. The inside of the store was even more impressive than the outside. Soft music played and gentle lights made everything sparkle. The walls were lined with display cases made of clear crystal. Inside, jewelry floated in the air, slowly turning so customers could see every angle. There were necklaces that looked like they were made of captured lightning, rings that held tiny galaxies, and earrings that sang soft melodies when the light hit them. Behind the main counter stood a being that Sandra had never seen before. It looked like it was made of living crystal, with faceted surfaces that caught and reflected light in amazing ways. When it moved, tiny chimes seemed to ring in the air. This was Zara, a member of the Resonance Collective, a peaceful species. Known for their skill with precious stones and their deep sense of honor. "Welcome to Stellar Gems," Zara said, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "How may I help you today?" Other customers browsed the store. A group of tall, elegant beings with pale blue skin examined a display of rings. Their movements were graceful and slow, like they were dancing underwater. Near the back, several insect-like creatures with multiple arms looked at bracelets that seemed to be made of living metal. Sandra felt out of place. Among all this beauty and wealth, she was about to speak when the door opened behind them. A woman entered, and everything about her screamed money and power. She wore a dress that probably cost more than Sandra made in a year. Her jewelry caught the light and threw it back in. Sharp flashes. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was perfect. Her smile was the kind that never reached her eyes. This was Victoria Blackwood, though Sandra didn't know her name yet. Victoria looked around the store like she owned it, her gaze passing over the alien customers with barely hidden distaste. When her eyes landed on Sandra, that cold smile got even colder. Sandra suddenly felt very aware of her dusty clothes and simple appearance. She could feel Victoria's judgment like a weight on her shoulders. But Kyle was there beside her, steady and calm, and that gave her strength. "I'm looking for something special," Sandra told Zara, trying to keep her voice steady. "A gift for someone who has been very kind to me." Zara's crystalline features seemed to brighten, and she moved toward a display case with graceful steps. "I have some beautiful pieces that would make wonderful gifts." "What did you have in mind?" Sandra began to relax a little, as Zara showed her different options. The crystalline being was kind and patient, explaining where each piece came from and what made it special. For a moment, Sandra forgot about Victoria's cold stare and just enjoyed the beauty of the jewelry and Zara's gentle company. But Victoria Blackwood was not the kind of person to stay quiet for long. Victoria Blackwood walked through the store like she owned every piece of jewelry in it. Her high heels clicked on the polished floor with sharp sounds that cut through the soft music. She moved with the kind of confidence that came from having too much money and too much power for too long. She stopped near a display of expensive necklaces and spoke, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I hope this place has improved their customer standards since my last visit." Her voice was sharp and cold. "Some establishments forget that they serve a certain class of people." Zara looked up from the jewelry she was showing Sandra. The crystalline being's faceted features seemed to dim a little, like a light had been turned down inside her. She had dealt with difficult customers before, but something about Victoria made her nervous. Sandra pretended not to hear and focused on a beautiful pendant that Zara was explaining. It was made from a rare crystal found only on the peaceful world of Harmony 7. The crystal changed colors based on the emotions of the person wearing it, cycling through soft blues and greens when the wearer was happy or calm. "This would be perfect," Sandra said quietly to Zara. "Dr. Chen loves things that are both beautiful and interesting." Victoria's attention turned towards Sandra's voice. She studied Sandra's appearance with the kind of look people give to something unpleasant. They found on the bottom of their shoe. Victoria's eyes took in the dusty clothes, the worn backpack, the simple ponytail, and the dirt under Sandra's fingernails. A cruel smile spread across Victoria's face. She recognized Sandra from news broadcasts about archaeological discoveries, but she decided to pretend she didn't. It would be more fun this way. "Excuse me," Victoria said, walking closer to Sandra and Zara. "I couldn't help but notice that you're looking at some very expensive items." She spoke to Sandra like she was talking to a child. "Are you sure you can afford pieces like these? They cost more than most people make in several years." Sandra felt her face grow hot. She looked down at her clothes and suddenly felt ashamed of how she looked. "I have money," she said quietly. "I just came back from a work assignment." Victoria laughed, and it was not a nice sound. "Work assignment? What kind of work leaves you looking like you've been rolling in dirt? Are you a cleaning person? A maintenance worker?" "Really, I think this store should have some kind of dress code. It's embarrassing to shop alongside people who clearly don't belong here." The other customers in the store began to notice what was happening. The tall blue-skinned being stopped looking at rings and turned toward the conversation. The insect-like creatures with multiple arms also paused in their browsing. Even beings who didn't understand human language could tell from Victoria's tone that something bad was happening. Kyle had been standing quietly behind Sandra, but now he moved a small step forward. His face showed no emotion, but something in his posture changed. He looked like a man who had made important decisions under pressure many times before. Sandra tried to ignore Victoria and focus on the pendant. But Victoria wasn't done. "I mean, look at those clothes," Victoria continued. "And that hair, and those hands. This person has clearly been doing manual labor, physical work." She said the words like they tasted bad in her mouth. Zara's crystalline form seemed to vibrate slightly, which was how her species showed distress. "All customers are welcome in our store," she said in her chiming voice. "We serve anyone who wishes to purchase our goods." Victoria turned her cold stare on Zara. "Well, maybe that's the problem with this place. Maybe you need to be more selective about your clientele. The better districts on the inner worlds, stores like this have standards. They understand that certain types of people shop in certain types of places." Now Victoria was getting louder and more customers were paying attention. A family of furry six-legged beings near the door stopped talking and looked over. Some flying creatures that had been examining bracelets landed on nearby perches to watch. "You see," Victoria said, speaking to the store in general now, "this is what happens when colonies let just anyone get above their station. People forget their place in society. They start thinking they can shop in the same stores as their betters." Hands began to shake a little. She'd faced down dangerous situations on alien worlds, but this kind of public humiliation was different. It cut deeper than physical danger. She started to put the pendant back. "Don't," Kyle said quietly. "Just loud enough for Sandra to hear. Don't let her win." But Victoria heard him too, and now she had a new target. "Oh, and what do we have here? The lady's boyfriend?" She looked Kyle up and down with the same cruel examination she had given Sandra. "Let me guess. You work with your hands too? Construction? Mining? Some kind of labor job that requires more muscle than brain?" Kyle didn't answer, just watched Victoria with steady eyes. But Victoria took his silence as permission to continue. "You know what's really pathetic?" Victoria said, her voice getting nastier. "It's when people like you try to act like you belong in civilized society, come into nice places wearing your work clothes, smelling like whatever hole you crawled out of, and you think that makes you equal to people who actually matter." Now she was talking to the alien customers too. I'm sure you've noticed this problem on your own worlds. These working-class humans who think that just because they've left their little planet, they can mix with important people. They don't understand that there's a natural order to things. Some people are meant to lead, and others are meant to follow. The insect-like beings clicked their mandibles together in what sounded like disapproval. The blue-skinned family whispered to each other in their musical language. The flying creatures ruffled their colorful feathers. Zara was now vibrating more noticeably, her crystalline surface catching the light in sharp, angry flashes. "Perhaps we should all focus on our shopping," she suggested, but her voice was strained. "Oh, I am focused on shopping," Victoria said. "I just want to make sure I'm shopping in a store that maintains proper standards. I spend a lot of money in places like this, and I expect a certain level of ... quality control." She moved closer to Sandra, who was still holding the pendant. "Tell me, dear, what exactly do you do for work? And please don't lie. I can smell the manual labor on you." Sandra looked up at Victoria. For the first time since the confrontation started, she spoke clearly. "I'm an archaeologist." Victoria's eyebrows went up in fake surprise. "An archaeologist? How fascinating. So you dig in the dirt for a living?" "That explains the smell and the appearance." She turned to the other customers. "See, manual labor, just like I said, digging holes and getting dirty." Some of the alien customers were now making sounds that clearly indicated they were upset. The universal translators in the store were working overtime to convert various expressions of displeasure into different languages. Kyle took another small step forward. His voice was still calm, But there was something underneath it now. Something that made people listen. I think that's enough. Victoria turned her attention back to him with delight. She had been hoping to provoke a reaction of the boyfriend. Speaks. Let me guess. You're going to defend your little dirt digger girlfriend? How romantic. She looked around the store again, making sure she had an audience. This is exactly what I'm talking about. These people have no class, no education, no understanding of how civilized society works. They think that just because they can earn a few credits doing manual labor, they can walk into establishments like this and demand respect. The crystalline chimes of Zara's distress were now audible to everyone in the store. Several alien customers had stopped pretending to shop and were openly staring at the confrontation. Victoria was just getting started. Victoria was enjoying herself now. She could see that Sandra was upset, and that made her feel powerful. She loved having an audience, especially one that included aliens who would go back to their worlds and talk about how crude and divided humans were. You know what the real problem is? Victoria said, her voice getting louder and more confident. It's that people like this think they deserve the same treatment as people like me. They don't understand that society has levels. Some people are meant to be leaders, to make important decisions, and handle large amounts of money. Others are meant to do simple work and stay in their place. She pointed at Sandra with one perfectly manicured finger. This woman digs in dirt for a living. She gets her hands dirty and crawls around in holes. That's fine work for someone of her background, but she shouldn't expect to be treated like an equal to people who actually contribute to society. The blue-skinned family near the wall made soft musical sounds that clearly showed they were unhappy. One of the insect beings clicked its mandibles in a pattern that sounded angry. But Victoria didn't care about alien opinions. She was focused on her human targets. And these colonial worlds are the worst, Victoria continued. They let anyone think they're important just because they can do some basic job. They don't understand real civilization, real culture, real class. She looked directly at Kyle. I bet you two are from some backwater colony where everyone pretends to be equal. You're in the real world now where people know the difference between quality and trash. Kyle's face remained calm, but something had changed in his eyes. He looked at Victoria like he was seeing through her, like he was reading a file about her that no one else could see. You're Victoria Blackwood, he said quietly. Victoria smiled with surprise and pleasure. Oh, you know who I am? Well, that's better. At least you have some sense of who matters in this galaxy. She turned to Sandra. You see? Your boyfriend isn't completely ignorant. He recognizes quality when he sees it. Blackwood Mining Consortium, Kyle continued in the same quiet voice, 17 star systems. 43 mining operations. Estimated personal wealth of 8 billion galactic credits. Victoria's smile got bigger. Oh, you're showing proper respect. Yes, I own mining operations across multiple sectors. I employ thousands of people. I provide raw materials that build ships and stations throughout this part of the galaxy. Nodded slowly. You also harvest sacred crystals from Resonance Collective burial sites without permission. Victoria's smile flickered a little, but she kept it in place. I don't know what you're talking about. All my operations are completely legal. Kepler 335c, Kyle said. The crystal caves that your company calls mine Site 7, the Resonance Collective calls them the singing tombs of their ancestors. Zara's crystalline form suddenly went very still. The chiming sounds that came from her stopped completely. Other customers were now listening carefully, especially the insect beings, who had very good universal translators. That's a ridiculous accusation, Victoria said, but her voice wasn't as confident as before. Those caves were uninhabited when we found them. There were no claims filed. Because the Resonance Collective doesn't believe in owning sacred places, Kyle replied. They believe sacred sites belong to all their people for all time. You knew this when you started mining there. Now Kyle's voice carried a different quality. It was still quiet, but everyone in the store could hear every word clearly. You also use forced labor from non-Federation worlds. Worlds where the local governments sell their own people to pay debts to your company. Victoria's face was starting to change color. You don't know what you're talking about. All my workers are paid fairly according to local standards. Local standards on worlds where you helped create the economic problems that forced people to work for almost nothing, Kyle said. Sigma Draconis. For you lent money to their government at impossible interest rates. They couldn't pay, you offered to take workers instead of credits. The insect beings were now clicking very rapidly to each other. The blue-skinned family had moved closer to hear better. Even the flying creatures had landed on display cases to listen. Who are you?
Adoria?
Victoria demanded. Her perfect composure was starting to crack. How do you know about my business operations? Kyle looked at her with steady eyes. I'm Kyle Stevens. For a moment, the name didn't register. Victoria stared at him blankly. Then understanding hit her like a physical blow. Her face went pale. Under her perfect makeup. You're lying, she whispered. 3 years ago, you sold weapons to the pirate fleet that attacked the Harmony 7 colony, Kyle continued. Plasma cannons, shield generators, and targeting computers. You knew they were going to use them against civilian targets. Now every alien in the store was paying complete attention. The name Kyle Stevens was known across the galaxy. The insect. Beings had stopped clicking and were perfectly still. The blue-skinned family had their mouths open in surprise. Even Zara had stopped vibrating and was staring at Kyle. The attack on Harmony 7 was stopped by a single human ship, Kyle said. The TDF Cruiser Marathon. I was the captain. We saved 2 million civilians that day, but we lost 300 good people doing it. People who died because pirates were using weapons that you sold them. Victoria took a step backward. I had no way of knowing what those weapons would be. Used for? I sell to legitimate buyers through proper channels. The buyer was Marcus Ironfist, leader of the Red Star Pirates, Kyle said. His ship registry was fake. His payment came from accounts linked to known criminal organizations. Your company's security department flagged the sale as suspicious. But you approved it anyway because the profit margin was too good to pass up. Store had become completely quiet except for Kyle's voice. Even the soft background music seemed to have stopped. You want to talk about people knowing their place, Kyle asked? Let's talk about your place. You're a war profiteer who makes money from suffering. You're a thief who steals from graveyards. You're a slaver who buys people like their equipment. Victoria's hands were shaking now. You can't prove any of that. Kyle reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. It looked like a simple communication pad, but when he activated it, holographic displays appeared in the air around him. Financial records, shipping manifests, recorded conversations, surveillance footage. Galactic Crimes Investigation Case File B7749, Kyle said. Cross-referenced with Terran Defense Force intelligence reports and Resonance Collective formal complaints. All evidence has been submitted to the proper authorities. Arrest warrants were issued this morning. The holographic displays showed everything. Victoria's illegal mining operations, ships full of workers who were barely better than slaves, weapons, shipments to known criminals. All of it documented, all of it proven. Victoria looked around the store desperately, as if searching for help or escape. But every face she saw showed the same thing: disgust, anger, and judgment. The aliens who moments before had been listening to her insult humans now understood exactly what kind of human she really was. Sandra Martinez, Kyle said, turning slightly toward his friend, discovered the ruins on Kepler 44 to be that led to the development of faster-than-light archaeology. Her work has helped preserve the cultural heritage of 47 different species. She saved more history than most people ever learn. Sandra looked up at Kyle with surprise. She had never heard him talk about her work like that. She's also the human who convinced the Galactic Council to pass the Universal Heritage Protection Act, Kyle continued. The law that makes it illegal to destroy archaeological sites for profit. The law that Victoria Blackwood has broken 17 times in the past 5 years. The reality of the situation was sinking in for everyone in the store. The woman in dirty clothes who Victoria had insulted was one of the most respected humans. In the galaxy, the man Victoria had dismissed as a manual laborer was a legendary hero who had saved millions of lives, and Victoria herself was about to be arrested as a war criminal. The silence in the store lasted only a few seconds, but it felt much longer. Then everything happened at once. Zara moved quickly to the main counter and pressed several buttons on a control panel. Soft chimes filled the air, followed by a gentle voice speaking in multiple languages. Emergency diplomatic protocols activated. Galactic authorities have been notified. All legal protections are now in effect for persons of diplomatic status. The holographic displays around Kyle were still showing Victoria's crimes. The evidence hung in the air like ghosts of all the terrible things she had done. Financial records, video footage of enslaved workers, recordings of her voice authorizing weapon sales to pirates. Victoria backed toward the door, but it was too late. The store's security system had locked down when Zara activated the diplomatic protocols. Number 8. One could enter or leave until the authorities arrived. "This is a mistake," Victoria said, her voice high and shaky. "I have lawyers. I have connections. You can't just accuse someone like me without proper procedures." But the alien customers were already moving. The eldest of the insect beings, a creature with golden bands around its forearms, approached Sandra with careful steps. When it spoke, its voice came through the universal translator with deep respect. "Dr. Martinez," the being said, "I am Hive Speaker Clicknine 7 of the A. Unity Council. Your work on the ancient sites of our home world helped us understand our own history. Our children learn your name in their first history lessons." Sandra looked surprised and a little embarrassed. "I just dig things up," she said quietly. "Anyone could have found those sites." "No," Click97 replied. "Not anyone. You found them with respect. You asked permission before you dug. You shared everything you learned with our people. Other humans tried to take our artifacts and sell them. You gave them back to us." The blue-skinned family had also moved closer. The tallest one, who seemed to be their leader, bowed in the flowing way of their species. "Dr. Martinez, a melody of deep waters, from the singing collective of Aquatica Prime, the healing crystals you discovered. In our ancient temples have saved thousands of our people from the wasting sickness." More beings were gathering around. Sandra and Kyle. Word was spreading through the shopping district faster than seemed possible. The store's communication system was sending updates to news networks, government offices, and diplomatic missions across the galaxy. Within minutes, the first new arrivals began appearing outside the store windows. A delegation of tall, thin beings with silver skin pressed their faces against the glass. These were the Whisper Folk, species that rarely spoke to outsiders, but who had learned to trust humans because of Sandra's careful work with their sacred sites. Flying creatures began landing on the roof and perching outside the windows. More insect beings arrived, their multiple arms carrying data pads and recording devices. The blue-skinned family was joined by dozens of their relatives, all wanting to see the humans who had helped their people. Inside the store, Kyle's communication. The device was beeping constantly. Messages were arriving from across the galaxy. Government officials, military commanders, alien ambassadors, all responding to the news that Kyle Stevens was here and that Victoria Blackwood had finally been exposed. "Captain Stevens," said a new voice from Kyle's device. It was Admiral Johnson of the Terran Defense Force. "We've been tracking Blackwood's operations for 2 years, but we couldn't get solid evidence. How did you manage to gather all this information?" Kyle spoke toward the device so everyone could hear. "Dr. Martinez's archaeological work led us to several of Blackwood's illegal mining sites. When we saw what was happening to the sacred places and the local workers, we started a formal investigation." Victoria, who had been standing near the locked door, suddenly found her voice again. "This is all lies. These aliens are working together to destroy human businesses. They're jealous of our success." The reaction from the alien customers was immediate and angry. The insect beings clicked their mandibles aggressively. The blue-skinned family made harsh musical sounds. Even gentle Zara's crystalline form flashed, with bright, angry light, but their anger wasn't directed at all humans. It was directed specifically at Victoria. "Success?" Clicknin7 said, its translated voice sharp with disgust. "You call stealing from graves success? You call enslaving innocent people success? You shame your entire species with such words." Melody of Deep Waters stepped forward, moving with the flowing grace of an underwater dancer, but her musical voice was hard as stone. We have worked with many humans over the years, Dr. Martinez, Captain Stevens, thousands of others who have shown us honor and friendship. You are not like them. You are what we fear humans might become if they forget their better nature. Outside the store, the crowd was growing larger. News vehicles were arriving, along with official transport ships carrying government representatives. The shopping district's security forces were setting up barriers to control the crowd, but they were doing it gently, understanding the importance of what was happening. Kyle's device beeped again. This time it was a different voice, speaking. In the complex harmonic language of the Resonance Collective, Zara immediately began translating, her chimes bright with excitement. The High Council of the Resonance Collective sends greetings to Captain Kyle Stevens and Dr. Sandra Martinez, Zara said. They say that justice for the desecration of the singing tombs has been too long delayed. They are grateful that humans of honor have finally brought this criminal to account.
Ow.
More messages were coming in. The Unity Council of the Insect Species formally thanked Kyle for his service during the Harmony 7 crisis. The Singing Collective of Aquatica Prime announced that they were commissioning a memorial crystal to honor Sandra's work. The Whisper Folk, who almost never made public statements, released a rare communication. Praising both humans for their respect for alien cultures, Victoria was becoming more desperate as she realized that the entire galaxy was turning against her. They're all working together, she shouted. This is a conspiracy to bring down successful human businesses. They want to keep us weak and dependent. But her words had no power now. The evidence of her crimes was still floating in the air around. Kyle, everyone could see the truth with their own eyes. A new group of aliens entered the store as the security locks disengaged. These were official representatives from the Galactic Justice Council, beings from a dozen different species who worked together to enforce laws across the galaxy. The leader was a tall being covered in smooth, dark fur. It carried a device that projected official symbols in the air above its head. Victoria Blackwood, it said in a voice that carried absolute authority. You are under arrest for crimes against sapient beings. Illegal mining operations on protected worlds, arms dealing with criminal organizations, and violations of the Universal Heritage Protection Act. As the Justice Council officers moved to arrest Victoria, more and more aliens continued to arrive. They came not to see a human criminal taken away, but to honor the two humans who had brought justice at last. The crowd outside was now enormous, but it was not an angry mob. It was a celebration. Beings from dozens of worlds had come to show their respect for Sandra and Kyle, and to demonstrate that the actions of one bad human did not represent all of humanity. Sandra looked around at all the faces, human and alien, alike, and felt overwhelmed. She had never realized that her work meant so much to so many people. She had just been doing what felt right, treating alien cultures with the same respect she would want for her own. Kyle put a gentle hand on her shoulder. This is what happens when you do good work for the right reasons, he said quietly. The whole galaxy notices. As the Justice Council officers led Victoria away in energy restraints, news of what had happened in the jewelry store was already spreading across the galaxy faster than light itself. The Galactic Communication Network carried the story to every inhabited world, every space station, every colony ship traveling between the stars. On Earth, in the old cities where humanity first learned to dream of the stars, people gathered around public screens to watch the footage from the store. Children who had been learning about Sandra's archaeological discoveries in school suddenly understood that their hero was a real person who had faced down a bully just like they might face at school. In the human colonies scattered across dozens of worlds, the story hit differently for each community. On New Denver, a mining world where workers struggled with dangerous conditions, people cheered when they learned that Victoria's forced labor operations had been shut down. They had heard rumors about companies that treated workers like slaves. And now, they knew that justice was possible. On Harmony 7, the world that Kyle had saved from pirate attack, the entire population gathered in the main square to watch the news reports. Mothers held up children who had been babies during the attack, telling them, "This is the man who saved your life." The memorial wall with the names of the 300 TDF soldiers, who had died protecting their world, was covered with fresh flowers within an hour. But the reaction wasn't limited to human worlds. On the homeworld of the Resonance Collective, millions of crystalline beings gathered in the singing caverns to create a harmony of gratitude that could be heard from orbit. They sang for Sandra, whose respectful work had helped them understand their own ancient history. They sang for Kyle, whose courage had brought justice for the desecration of their sacred sites. The insect worlds of the Unity Council erupted in a clicking celebration that lasted for days. In their hive cities, worker drones spelled out Kyle's name with their bodies while creating geometric patterns that told the story of how he had protected their nursery worlds from pirates. The Queen Mothers issued a joint statement declaring Sandra an honorary egg tender, the highest honor their species could give to an outsider. On the ocean world of Aquatica Prime, the Blueskin Singing Collective performed the ancient song of deep friendship that hadn't been sung for outsiders in over 1,000 years. Their crystal cities beneath the waves glowed with bioluminescent patterns that spelled out messages of thanks in a dozen languages. But perhaps the most meaningful reactions came from the young, beings across the galaxy who were just learning about the bigger universe beyond their own worlds. In alien schools on hundreds of planets, teachers used the story to explain important lessons about right and wrong, about courage and kindness, about how individual choices could affect entire civilizations. On the fungal world of Spore Prime, young mushroom beings learned about how Sandra had carefully preserved their ancestors, growing songs instead of destroying them for profit like other archaeologists had tried to do. Their teacher's spores explained that this was what friendship between species could look like when people chose to be kind instead of greedy. In the crystal schools of the Resonance Collective, young beings who were just learning to make their first harmonious sounds practiced by singing Sandra's name and Kyle's name in perfect pitch. Their elder crystals taught them that these humans showed why their species had chosen to trust the strange, soft beings from the distant world called Earth. The story also reached the dark corners of the galaxy, where Victoria's crimes had taken place. On Sigma Draconis IV, the world where she had forced the government into debt to create cheap workers, the news brought both celebration and sadness. Families who had been separated when their relatives were sold to pay debts finally learned that rescue was coming. Ships were already being sent to bring home workers who had been trapped in Victoria's mines and factories, in the forced labor camps on distant asteroids. Guards were surprised when their prisoners began singing and dancing despite their terrible conditions. The workers had heard the news through smuggled communication devices, and they knew that their suffering would soon end. Some had given up hope of ever seeing their families again, but now they dared to believe that freedom was possible. The Galactic Justice Council worked faster than it had ever worked before. Within hours of Victoria's arrest, her entire criminal empire was being dismantled. Bank accounts were frozen, illegal operations were shut down, and enslaved workers were being freed across 17 star systems. But the council wasn't working alone. Volunteers from dozens of species offered to help with the rescue operations. Human ships worked alongside alien vessels to reach the most remote mining sites. Translators and medical teams from the Healing Collective offered their services to help freed workers recover from their experiences. The speed and cooperation of the response surprised even experienced diplomats. Wars had been fought over smaller issues, but in this case, the entire galaxy seemed united in wanting to help fix the damage that Victoria had caused. On New Terra, Prime crowds continued to gather outside the jewelry store even after Sandra and Kyle had left. Beings from many worlds left flowers, crystals, and other gifts near the entrance. They wanted to mark the place where justice had finally been served, where the truth had been told, where good had triumphed over evil Zara. The crystalline shopkeeper found herself becoming an unexpected celebrity. News reporters from across the galaxy wanted to interview the being who had witnessed the confrontation. But Zara was most interested in talking about how the experience had restored her faith in the possibility of friendship between different species. "I have served customers from many worlds," she told a reporter from the Galactic News Network. "I have seen the best and worst of many species. But today I learned something important about humans. They have the capacity for great evil, yes, but they also have the capacity for even greater good. And the good ones will always fight to stop the evil ones. The interview was broadcast across the galaxy and became one of the most watched programs in recent history. Parents from hundreds of worlds showed it to their children as an example of how to judge others fairly, how to look at actions rather than appearances, how to understand that every species contained both heroes and villains. In the human colonies, the story sparked a wave of soul-searching. People began asking themselves what kind of humans they wanted to be. Did they want to be like Victoria, taking advantage of others for personal gain? Or did they want to be like Sandra and Kyle, using their abilities to help and protect others? Youth organizations across human space reported record enrollment in archaeological programs. Diplomatic training and military academies focused on peacekeeping rather than conquest. Young humans wanted to follow in the footsteps of their heroes, to be the kind of people who made their species proud rather than ashamed. The alien worlds noticed this response and were impressed by it. Many species had expected humans to defend Victoria because she was one of their own, or to dismiss the alien complaints as jealousy or misunderstanding. Instead, humans had been among the loudest voices calling for justice and the most eager volunteers in the rescue operations. This surprised many. Alien leaders who had been growing worried about human expansion and influence in the galaxy, they had seen species like Victoria's crimes as evidence that humans might eventually become a threat to galactic peace. But the response to Victoria's exposures suggested that humanity was capable of policing itself, rejecting members who brought shame to their species. The story became more than just news. It became a symbol of what the galaxy could be when different species worked together for justice and peace. It showed that good and evil existed in every species, but that good could triumph when people of conscience were willing to stand up and speak the truth. And in quiet moments, on worlds across the galaxy, parents told their children about the day when a simple woman in dusty clothes and a quiet man in plain shirt had shown the universe what true heroism looked like. 6 months after the incident at Stellar Gems, Sandra Martinez stood in the same jewelry store, but everything had changed. The store was busier now, filled with customers from species she had never seen before. Word had spread across the galaxy that this was a place where all beings were treated with respect, and creatures from the most distant worlds made special trips just to shop there. Zara moved between the displays with her usual grace, but now she wore a special crystal pendant that changed colors as she moved. It was a gift from the Resonance Collective Council, marking her as a speaker of truth for her courage in standing up to Victoria. Blackwood that day, Sandra carried a small wrapped package as she approached the counter. Inside was the pendant she had originally wanted to buy for Dr. Chen, but now it carried a different meaning. Dr. Chen had used her research funding to establish the Universal Heritage Foundation, an organization dedicated to protecting archaeological sites across the galaxy from people like Victoria. Dr. Martinez, Zara said, her crystalline voice ringing with warmth. "It is always an honor to see you." Sandra smiled. She had grown more comfortable with the attention over the past months, though she still preferred the quiet of archaeological sites to the crowds that seemed to follow her everywhere now. "Hello, Zara. I wanted to thank you again for what you did that day." Standing up to Victoria took real courage. Zara's faceted features seemed to glow brighter. "I only did what any decent being should do. But I learned something important that day about the power of speaking truth when it matters most." Through the store windows, Sandra could see the memorial that had been built in the shopping district plaza. It wasn't a memorial to the incident itself, but to all the workers who had been freed from Victoria's illegal operations. Beings from dozens of worlds had contributed to its construction, and it bore inscriptions in over 100 languages, all saying the same thing: freedom belongs to all thinking beings. Kyle entered the store just as Sandra was finishing her purchase. He wore the dress uniform of the newly created Galactic Ethics Council, where he now served as the first human ambassador. The uniform was simple but carried symbols from many different worlds, representing his role in bringing different species together. "Ready for the ceremony?" he asked Sandra. She nodded, though she still felt nervous about public events. Today was the official opening of the new Galactic Justice Training Center. where beings from all species would learn to work together to prevent crimes like Victoria's from happening again. Sandra had been asked to give a speech about the importance of preserving cultural heritage, while Kyle would speak about the responsibility that came with power and influence. As they left the store, beings throughout the shopping district stopped to wave and offer greetings. A group of young insect beings approached with their teacher, practicing the human custom of asking for autographs. Sandra signed their data pads while Kyle answered their questions about what it was like to be a spaceship captain. "Did you really fight 100 pirate ships by yourself?" asked one young insect, its mandibles clicking with excitement. Kyle smiled. "It wasn't quite 100, and I wasn't alone. I had a crew of brave people with me, and we worked together. The most important thing I learned is that one person alone can't solve big problems. We need friends from many different worlds working together." The teacher insect translated Kyle's words into the clicking language of their species, and the young ones clicked back enthusiastically. Sandra watched the interaction and thought about how much the galaxy had changed. 6 months ago, many species had been suspicious of human intentions. Now, human children and alien children played together in parks across dozens of worlds. They walked through the district toward the new training center, passing shops and restaurants that showed the increasing cooperation between species. A human baker worked alongside a fungal chef from Spore Prime, creating breads that combined the best of both cultures. A Resonance Collective crystal singer performed with a human musician, their harmonies creating music that no single species could make alone. The training center itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Built by architects from 12 different species, it combined the flowing curves favored by aquatic beings with the precise angles that crystalline species preferred, all held together by human engineering techniques and powered by clean energy. Systems developed by the Unity Council. Inside the main auditorium, representatives from hundreds of worlds had gathered for the opening ceremony. Sandra felt overwhelmed looking at the crowd, but Kyle placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Remember," he said quietly, "6 months ago, most of these beings had never heard your name. Now they're here because they believe in the work you do. They want to learn how to protect the things that matter, just like you taught them." The ceremony began with the traditional greetings of each species. The insect beings clicked in perfect harmony. The aquatic species sang their deep ocean songs. The crystalline beings created chimes that resonated through the building. The fungal beings released spores that glowed in beautiful patterns. Humans applauded, adding their own sound to the celebration. When Sandra stepped up to speak, the auditorium became completely quiet. She looked out at all the different faces and forms, thinking about how each species had trusted her with their most precious historical sites. "When I was a child," she began, "I used to dig holes in my backyard, looking for treasure. I thought you treasure meant gold or jewels or things that were worth money. But when I grew up and started working on other worlds, I learned that the real treasure was knowledge, understanding how people lived, what they believed, what they hoped for." She paused, seeing beings throughout the audience, translating her words for others. "Every site I've worked on has taught me something new, not just about the past, but about the beings who trust me with their history. The greatest honor in my life has been learning that species across the galaxy were willing to share their most sacred places with a human who just wanted to understand." The applause that followed included clicking, singing, chiming, and dozens of other sounds that meant approval in different cultures. Sandra felt tears in her eyes as she realized that these beings weren't just being polite. They genuinely appreciated her work and what it represented. Kyle's speech focused on the lessons learned from Victoria's crimes and the importance of using power responsibly. He talked about how every species in the galaxy had produced both heroes and villains, but that the measure of a civilization was how it dealt with those who chose evil over good. Victoria Blackwood was human, he said, and as a human I am ashamed of what she did. But shame alone isn't enough. We have to work actively to prevent people like her from causing harm. We have to choose every day to be better than our worst. Examples. After the ceremony, Sandra and Kyle walked through the center's training facilities. They saw young beings from many worlds learning together how to investigate crimes, how to protect vulnerable populations, how to preserve cultural heritage sites. Human instructors worked alongside alien teachers, sharing knowledge and techniques. In one classroom, a group of students was studying the Victoria Blackwood case as an example of how different types of crimes could be connected. Future archaeologists were learning Sandra's techniques for working respectfully with local populations. In a third, military officers from multiple species were learning Kyle's strategies for protecting civilians during conflicts. As evening approached, Sandra and Kyle found themselves back in the shopping district, sitting on a bench near the memorial to freed workers. Beings of many species walked past, going about their daily lives in a galaxy that had become a little bit safer and a little bit more just. Do you think it will last? Sandra asked. This cooperation, this friendship between species? Kyle considered the question carefully. I think it depends on people like us continuing to do the right thing, even when no one is watching. Victoria's crimes were successful for years because good people didn't know about them or didn't think they could stop them. But when the truth came out, the whole galaxy responded. Sandra nodded, thinking about the young beings she had seen. In the training center, they were learning not just skills and techniques, but values. They were learning that every species deserved respect, that power should be used to protect rather than exploit, that friendship between different peoples was not only possible but necessary. The two humans sat quietly as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Above them, ships from dozens of worlds moved through space on missions of trade, diplomacy, and exploration. It was a galaxy where a human archaeologist and a crystalline shopkeeper could be friends, where insect beings and aquatic species could work together for justice, where the worst criminals could be brought down by ordinary people who refused to stay silent. It was a galaxy where humanity had earned its place not through conquest or wealth, but through the simple choice to stand up for what was right, even when it was difficult. And in jewelry stores and training centers, in memorial plazas and children's classrooms, across hundreds of worlds and countless species. That legacy continued to grow. The stars shone down on a universe where friendship was stronger than fear, where justice was more powerful than